This is Alfred Prentice. On the morning of August the 7th, 2006, in flat 8, RSA Sunningdale, Hamilton, I intend to talk about my dear wife Phyllis's parents on this tape. That is Sidney Burton Forster and Gertrude Emily Forster, née Arnold. I first knew them. The first time I'd ever had real connection with them was late in 1940, just before Christmas, when after Phyllis had been hurt in the bombing at Blackshot's Lane. And I went to see her in a hospital, and then later at Brentwood convalescing. And after the first meeting, she said to me, would you please, on the way home, call in and see my parents at number 6 Woodview, the house they'd been allocated after their own house had been demolished. Their own house was only 10 months old. They first occupied it in October 1939. Moved to Blackshot's Lane, number 142A. Anyway, I called and saw them, and that was the first time I really had a chance to talk to them. My prospective father-in-law, Sidney, I'll tell you all I know, not very much. I know that he was born on the railway station master's house at Plaistow railway station. His father was station master. I don't know whether it was LMS, but it was LMS what we used. And he was quite a well-respected figure, being a station master. In those days, they were somebody, standing there with his great big Albert chain on his waistcoat, with his watch and his hat and all that. Anyway, that's where Sidney was born. I don't know what date. It would be around about 1890, 1895, between that area there. I know very little about his boyhood or when he grew up. And I know that he went to work as a barman, I think it was, in the Basin Tavern in Tilbury Docks. And that's where he met Gertrude, because she was a barmaid. And she lived in Tilbury, of course. So I don't know much about their wedding or dates or anything like that. I do know that Uncle Matthew Forster, was Sidney's older brother. And I think he had other relations, sisters and brothers too, but I know very little about them. One of his brothers lived over the other side of the Thames in Gravesend, or over there somewhere, and a sister. As I say, I know one of his sisters. She met an untimely end, smoking in bed, and the bed caught fire. And I think that was Bertha, after which my dear wife, second name, Phyllis Bertha. Anyway, going back to what I do know, Gladys, the oldest child, was born in the end of 1915, and Sid was already in the Royal Artillery. He enlisted in the Royal Artillery in the First World War had started, and he told me he used to man a telephone in a forward observation position for these artillery, which were howitzers. I think they were 11-inch howitzers. That it means they fired their shell upwards into the air, and it came all down almost vertical on the enemy. Howitzers, short fat barrel to the gun. And Later in the war, towards the war end, Sid, their son, was born, Sydney, eldest son. He was a couple of years older than me, so he would have been born around about 1917 or 1918, something like that. And after the war, of course, in 1920, Florence, she would have been, she will be 86 this year. She would be born in 1920, same year as I, only later. And then there was Phyllis in March 1922, followed by Henry. I don't know his exact birth date, but he would be about, I think he's in his 70s now. He's, at the time of talking, he had a heart attack some time back, and he's a widower, and he's not in very good shape. And the youngest child was Matthew, named after the uncle who lived with them, Matthew. He would be, let's see, he would be about, I'm just guessing now, he would be about 70 now, I think. Yeah. Anyway, Sid started work in Tilbury Docks, and he became what they called a permanent hand for Cooper and Scrutton's stevedores, and that means he got a regular standing wage and got paid extra when they did what they called tonnage, when they actually unloaded the ships. But he wasn't a casual labourer like most of the labour in Tilbury Docks at that time. The men just had to turn up and hoping that they'd be picked out from the throng to go to work. That's how it was. That situation persisted up until the war, and then it was changed. There's no longer casual labour, which is a good thing. They lived in St Chad's Road, Tilbury. First of all, they lived over the other marsh in Church Road. They are the houses nearest to Tilbury Dock Station, and that's where Phyllis was born. And I don't know about Henry and Joan. I forgot to mention Joan. Joan comes after Phyllis. She was a couple of years younger than Phyllis, and so she would be 82 this year, and she celebrated her 60th wedding earlier this year to Fred Baker. Anyway, they lived over in the old house, some of the first houses. Then they moved into a new council house, St Chad's Road, which was bigger, and it was the house was in a form of a L, or three houses, and they occupied the centre one. Occupied the centre house opposite the Orient off licence across the road on the end of Rayful Avenue. And of course it was very handy for the children to go to school. Only be a couple of 100 yards from St Chad's School. I presume all the children went, and I know Phyllis did. I think Joan won a scholarship to go to the intermediate at school in Grays. So that's where they worked, and I first, up until and Sid, of course, I'm talking about Sid, as he came out of the army, he liked to talk about, he used to talk to me about the war years, and I didn't know very much about them up until, as I said, the time in 1940 when I went and visited them after seeing Phyllis in convalescent home. Sid was a very nice man, Sid, and he and I became quite close. He treated me like a son. He's a very good man, and I respected him too. Gertrude was all right. I'll talk about her later, but she was all right. But Sid, he worked right up until the war. Then they wanted him to go up to Glasgow, to Gourock on the Clyde, because the Tilbury Docks was closed to merchant shipping because of the Germans just across the channel. but he didn't like to go, so they put him off, and he got a job in the air raid ARP, air raid precautions, and he was some sort of a stretcher bearer, that sort of thing, helping like that. And they continued that. Of course, what happened, of course, they lost their house, a lovely new house in Blackshots Lane, and had to move into this rented house in Woodview, number 6, where I met them. And it was from there that Phyllis and I got married in 1942. But throughout the war, Sid worked ARP. Then after the war finished, Gertrude and Sid, they established a fish and chip shop in Tilbury. And Bill Bird, the owner, he kept on working for them. But they didn't stay in that all that long. They started up they bought a upholstery repair business in Grays. I think it was William Street, Grays. Upholstery repaired chairs and things. And that lasted for a while, and then they sold it. And of course we came to New Zealand the end of 52, and all that. Oh yes. Oh, before we come to New Zealand, that's right. They bought a shop in London Road, Grays, a general shop selling all things. In New Zealand, they'd be called a dairy, but not in England. It was a corner shop in London Road, Grays, and the old lady worked in that, Gertrude and Pop, and about once a week, Phyllis used to catch a bus from East Tilbury and come to and spend a day working with her mother in the shop. I think she rather liked that. The only trouble is she was on her feet, and her poor old legs didn't. But anyway, they kept on. That's what they were doing when we left England in end of 52. They still had the shop, but they disposed of it very soon afterwards, and went to bought a house in Theobald's Avenue in Grays, the top of Horsey Hill Road, and we visited them in 1960. But by this time, Gertrude had passed away, and Sid was living in this house they bought with Tim Hitt. He was more like a son to him, and we stayed there for a couple of months while we went home in 62, 63. But soon we came back to New Zealand, and soon after that, Sid passed away, and that was both Phyllis's parents gone. So that's all I can tell you about Sid. He was a great man. He loved you boys, your two boys, John and Dink. And when we took Elizabeth home in 1962, she was a little girl of 6. He used to take her down the road to the primary school, and Elizabeth went there for a couple of months, and he used to walk down with her. So he was a great chap, and we were really sorry when we heard he'd passed away, because we weren't there. With Gertrude Emily Arnold Forster, I know that her family lived over the other marsh, right near where Church Road and Broadway, near Tilbury Dock Station. Her family lived, and I know them because backing onto their house, it was an alleyway, and then there was a cricket field that belonged to Webb's, the carriers. And I used to go, when I was a boy, go and watch my Uncle Bert play cricket and help out carrying the bags and all that sort of thing. I used to like that. That's where the Arnolds lived. Backed onto the... I can't remember the name. There was a string of about 4 or 5 houses. But as I say, Gertrude, she probably went to Lansdowne Road School, or whatever, and then, until she went to work in Tilbury Docks as a barmaid when she met Sid, and from there, of course, her life was bound up with Sid. But I don't know much about the Arnolds. I know that she had a sister, lived in a sister who married a chap who was a pawnbroker, jeweller, Bill. They lived over in Norwood in southeast London. And as I say, I know very little about her, but there was a family of them, all right, Arnolds. So I'm sorry I can't tell you more because I don't know. Up until the time she married Pop and all that, when they Pop was Sydney, of course. Well, anyway, of course, when she married Sid, and I've already told you about Sid and all that sort of thing, they married, and she died quite young. I think she was only 64, and we were living in New Zealand, of course, and so it's always sad when your parents pass away, like mine did too. We weren't there to see them before they left, but that's how it was when you come to a new country, isn't it? But Gertrude, she was the bossy one of the family, and she was quite a determined woman. She didn't stand any mucking about, and I don't think the girls were actually frightened of her, but they knew that when she said something, she meant what she said, and the girls had to, and boys had to do what they were told. I think out of all the family, Sydney, the eldest boy, I think he was the favourite boy, followed by Joan, who's still alive. She was the favourite girl. That's as an onlooker, detached from her family. That was my opinion. But as I say, she was responsible when her daughter Phyllis was getting married. She made sure it was a good, what shall I say, a good occasion, and she did. You can tell by the wedding photographs, all the wedding dresses, for the bridesmaids and Matthew, the little boy, that she put a bit of time and work into it, ensuring that her daughter had a good wedding. So, and she loved our boys. She liked both of them. I don't think she had one more than the other, but she loved our little boys, and so did Sid. And of course, we used to take them up to when we lived at East Tilbury. We used to take them up on the bus to see their grandparents, and we used to make a fuss of them. So that's all I can tell you about Gertrude, and I think she would have liked to have been a career woman. She would have been good if she'd had a house and a career woman, and she had a couple of servants. But she was all right. She was all right to me. I can only say how she was to me, and so was Pop, Sid. They were both very, very good to us, and it was very sad when we left England and left them behind, like we did my parents. So there's not much more I can say about Sid and Gertrude, and so I'll leave it at that. And if necessary, I will add some to it at a later date. This is Alfred on the 23rd of September 2006. I've been playing through this tape and going through the lists of the foster children. I've omitted Joan Ruby, Joan. She was. It wasn't Henry next door, younger than Phyllis. It was Joan, and then Henry. And Joan, of course, is still alive, and she celebrated her 60th wedding anniversary around about Easter this year. Married to Fred, and they got the one son, Donald, as you know. So I missed that bit out there, so I've added it on the end, so as a postscript. But I have asked Joan, I've had a letter from her, she's going to try and get Donald to get something about the Forsters. As I say, I know very little about them, unfortunately, but I don't think there's any of them are interested in genealogy. But anyway, we'll wait and see if Joan comes up with something. So I'll sign off now on the Saturday afternoon of the 23rd September.